welcome sa isang bagong episode ng History by Bike. And pupunta tayo ngayon sa Ortigas Foundation Library. Merong seminar ngayon doon, free talk about World War II in the Philippines. So merong mga guest speakers doon, Sir Tony Feredo, si Ma'am Desiree, Cua-Benipayo. So bago natin simulan, please make sure mag-like, mag-share at mag-subscribe sa aking YouTube channel, History by Bike. So i-hit na yung subscribe button. So itong bagong episode ng History by Bike.
So the Philippine suffrage movement, so the Federation was the prime mover for lobbying for women's suffrage. As early as 1907, the first bill was filed by Cebu Congressman Filimon Soto through the encouragement of Pura Villanueva Cala, who was the first Manila Carnival Queen. But it took 30 years of lobbying in a male-dominated Congress before the suffrage law can be passed. So during the 1935 Constitution, the Constitutional Convention said they will hold a plebiscite for women. Women only. Women will vote. But the women, they have to get 300,000 yes votes, which was quite an impossible number at that time, and kind of like was doomed to fail. But the Federation women were not deterred. They campaigned from Manila to Apari to Halo. Si Escoda and si Pilar Hidalgo Lim would even go with General Lim on his inspection trips in Batangas, just so, to be able to get to Batangas. Syempre, at that time, hindi naman mahirap siguro yung mga ganyan, di ba? So, all the challenges, the women were not deterred. In fact, I read in Pura Villanueva Calau's book, how the Filipina got the vote. She said, the challenge then was not really if the men will allow the women to vote, but the challenge was to get the women to be interested in the situation. Syempre, no, this was in the 1930s, so quite different from now. But these ladies who really campaigned hard, they broadcasted in the radio, they broadcasted in their native tongues. Judge Almeida would speak in Spanish. Some of them would speak in Pangalatok, in Ilonggo, Cebuano, and Josefa Llanes Escoda would always broadcast in Ilocano because she was an Ilocano. So on April 30, during plebiscite, they got an overwhelming 448,000 votes, yes votes. And so, women's suffrage, next slide please, became a law on September 17, 1937. And here in this picture, you can see President Manuel Quezon signing Commonwealth Act number 34, which granted women the right to vote and to be voted upon. Okay? So, Quezon was always supportive of the women's suffrage. Siyempre, takot lang na kay Aurora. Alam mo, sign it. Takot lang niya, di ba? May halos yun. Alright, so, alam naman natin si Quezon, di ba, marami siyang extracurricular activities. Pero takot lang kay Aurora. Alright, next slide please. Alright, so another big program of the Federation was the institution of the Girl Scouts of the Philippines. So 2 years after suffrage, the team of Pilar Hidalgo, Lim, and Escoda, because Pilar Hidalgo at that time was the president of the Federation, Josefa Llanes was the executive secretary. So in many books, they will say Lim Escoda tandem. Parang galing-galing talaga nung dalawa. So they said in 1939, because the Boy Scouts was already existing since earlier pa. So they said that the youth of the Philippines will not be represented well kung walang Girl Scouts. Hindi pwede Boy Scouts lang. So they lobbied, they talked to the officials of the Boy Scouts of the Philippines who agreed to sponsor them because si General Lim was the national treasurer. Alright, so they sponsored Escoda. She was sent to the US and England to study Girl Scouting. Lahat, she went to camp, she went to a lot of training. And then when she returned in 1939, next slide please, I really love this picture. So when she returned in 1939, seeing that war was imminent, and she knew that, she had very little time, she quickly trained leaders and organized Girl Scout troops all over the country. If you notice, the first Girl Scouts were not grades 1.
Mostly where the troops were concentrated. Now, for the USAPE, we had about approximately 110,000 men were in service. But you have to note, like what Des mentioned earlier, that the Philippine Army was still in its infancy. So some of these troops actually had, except for Lim and Kapinpin's division, which had 8 weeks of basic training and 2 years of existence, some of the Philippine Army units that went into Bataan only had 2 or 3 weeks of training. As compared to the Japanese, Homa landed his main invasion force composed of 43,000 men, plus minus. So, but he had with him one well-equipped division, which is the 48th, all right, which was considered a motorized division in the Japanese. And then you had the 16th division, which fought in China. although it fought in China, its reputation wasn't really good. All right, and then it had like the 4th and 7th Tank Regiments that landed together with the main invasion body. So you see the disparity, it's 110 and 43. However, 43 battle-tested soldiers and 110 with majority, about 60 to 70% were green troops. So the most elite troops that the Americans ever had at that time were the Scouts, the Philippine Scouts, and of course the U.S. Army units. So what happened was, on December 8th, Clark Airfield was bombed. So what you have here is an actual photo of the bombing of Clark Field, taken at 22,000 feet from a Japanese bomber. Okay? So, like what Des mentioned earlier, MacArthur was caught by surprise. His Air Force was totally obliterated in the day. And then the Japanese made landings in the north, one in Apari and Vigan, and followed on later by the main landings on December 22nd, which is 1941. So you see here in the photos, you've got General Homa already. This is one of the rare photos of him being already in the wharf, walking, and some of the other Japanese troops landing. So you can see there on the farther left, rank has its privileges. You would see a Japanese soldier down to his undies, while the officer there just actually commanding them, you know, trying to take a truck that was beached out in Lingayen, right? And another set, this was taken in the landings in Lamon Bay, which is down south. You would see again Japanese in their underwears, okay, pushing a truck. All right. And then, of course, you know, photos of the 4th Tank Regiment landing in Rosario, and then in Tayabas, which is now Quezon Province, Japanese 16th Reconnaissance Regiment, which had light tanks. So on that day alone, you know, the Japanese landed, you know, like what I mentioned, about 43,000 men. So there was always the saying that the Japanese that landed in the Philippines was well equipped in terms of weapons and vehicles. It's a myth. And the reason being because the Japanese relied a lot of their transports using mules, horses, and even bicycles. And the most basic tool that ever used were their feet.
Yeah.
So a lot of the Japanese that landed, you know, thinking that, oh, you'd hear stories that, oh, the Japanese landed, they had so many tanks, they rushed in Luzon. It's not the case, right? So what I mentioned earlier, the Japanese 40th Division, saying that it's a motorized unit, but still, one regiment relied mostly on bicycles.